It was supposed to be a defining day for the company. Executives from across the country had flown in, presentations were polished, and the boardroom buzzed with anticipation of a $300 million partnership. Among the arrivals was David Carter, a quietly confident black businessman in his mid-40s, dressed in a tailored Navy suit. He had built his empire from the ground up, earning respect in silence and letting results speak louder than introductions ever could. To most people in the room, David was just another face, calm, polite, unassuming. He didn't flaunt his wealth or his power. He simply carried himself with dignity. But standing by the door was Richard, the manager. A man in his early 50s, sharp-eyed, the kind who made snap judgments and wore them like law. When David approached, Richard's expression shifted. He didn't recognize him as an executive and didn't see him as a decision-maker. All he saw was a man he thought didn't belong. Without hesitation, Richard raised a hand, blocking David's path. The air grew tense. People glanced toward the doorway, curious and confused. David's face remained calm, though a storm brewed beneath his composure. The stage was set, and no one knew the next few minutes would change everything. The moment David was stopped, the atmosphere shifted. Richard leaned in, his tone dismissive, laced with arrogance. "This meeting is for executives only," he muttered, gesturing toward the hallway as if David were an uninvited guest. Conversations faltered. Whispers floated through the air. David didn't push back. He simply looked Richard in the eye, silent, steady, weighing the situation. Seconds stretched like hours. Richard grew bolder, his voice louder now, making sure everyone nearby heard. "You're not on the list. Please step aside before you embarrass yourself." The words cut deep, deliberate humiliation. David stood firm, but behind his silence lived a lifetime of moments like this, moments where people saw only his skin, never his worth. Boardrooms where he was underestimated, deals where he was doubted. All of it surged quietly in his mind, and still, he waited. Inside, senior executives shifted uncomfortably. Some recognized his face from the files, the very man whose approval could seal their future. A nervous assistant whispered to Richard, trying to intervene, but he brushed it off with a scoff. The tension reached its breaking point. David finally stepped forward, not with anger, not with shouting, but with a calm authority that silenced the room. All eyes turned to him as he pulled out a slim leather folder. Inside was the contract, his signature already on the dotted line, pending only his verbal approval. The room froze. Richard's smirk vanished, replaced with horror as realization set in. The man he had dismissed wasn't just another face. He was the one holding the keys to the $300 million deal. Gasps rippled, sharp and echoing, as the truth cut through the arrogance. David's voice was low and steady, but carried like thunder. He introduced himself not with boast or pride, but with the quiet authority of someone who had nothing left to prove. The executives hung on every word, their futures balanced on his decision. Richard stammered an apology that fell flat in the heavy air of shame. And then came the silence, the kind that weighs more than sound. David looked around the room, his eyes sharp but steady, letting the moment sink deep. He didn't need to yell. He didn't need revenge. His presence alone disproved every prejudice thrown his way. When he finally spoke, his words weren't about himself, but about the lesson they all needed to hear. "Next time," he said, locking eyes with Richard, "see the person before the judgment." The words rang louder than any reprimand. The room stayed hushed, executives shifting uneasily, reminded of the cost of blind arrogance. The deal went through, but for David, it was about more than business. It was proof that no matter how high you rise, prejudice still waits at the door, ready to cut you down. Yet it was also proof of something greater, that dignity, patience, and truth can dismantle ignorance in ways anger never could. And for us watching, the question remains, how many more times will stories like this repeat before people finally learn? How many doors will be blocked and how many judgments made before humanity chooses to see worth instead of skin?